Hi there. So what I'd like to do in this video is to go through the creation of a sketched part that has a little bit more complexity to it. Something along the lines of what you're looking at in the second problem of assignment 1. The other thing I'd like to do is kind of mention the fact that there's going to be multiple different ways of creating any given part. So what I'm going to do now is just make this part just using sketch tools. As we move further on, we'll recognize that there's other ways to do these parts, and you'll have to end up finally choosing what method you like best. So when I'm going to go ahead, and this part itself doesn't necessarily have any dimensions on it, but just looking at it, it's some type of bracket, and we would assume a bracket isn't 7 millimeters in this dimension. It makes more sense to assume that it's 7 inches or 7.13 inches. So I'm going to make this part using the inch scale. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new part. So I'm inch pound seconds down here. I'm going to just grab the window down a little bit and resize it so that we can take a look at the image at the same time. All right, I think we have about all the image here. Let me shrink it down a little bit more. Okay, so I am going to make this the point that's going to be coincident with the origin of my sketch. And then I'm going to move this way, and I'm actually going to use, you should see this in the Solid Professor videos, a method for going from a straight line into a circular arc. And I'm going to come up, go across, put this angle in, come down again, make a circular arc, and come down and end. So let me go ahead and create my sketch. I'm going to do this sketch on the front plane. I'm going to use my line tool, and I'm going to click here. And instead of just making a straight line segment now, I'm just going to drag it out. I can set the distances afterwards. So I'm going to click here, left mouse click. Now I'm going to pull out, and then I'm going to come back to that point, and that kind of starts the circular arc tool. So now I have a circular arc. I'll click, and I'm going to move on again. Now you can see that it has witness lines here, and that's what I'm going to want. I'm going to want a tangency constraint, and you can see that there's a tangency constraint that it's going to put on there. So I'll bring it up here, and now I'll stop the sketch, or the sketch tools. Let me just go ahead and put in the distances that I want. So I'm going to use my Smart Dimension tool, and now if you notice, the 7.13 is from this point to the center of the circle, and you'll see that this circle in this radius, see where the radius dimension is, that's R 1.13. So they're saying that this circular line has its center at the center of this circle. So when it's being dimensioned to that, it would mean that I would start my dimension from this point and this point, and I want to make sure that I don't do an aligned dimension now. I want to do a horizontal dimension, and I'm going to make that 7.13. Okay. Then the radius here is going to be 1.13. So let me come in here, and I get a radius tool. So I'm going to put that in as 1.13. And the distance I want here from the center of this circle to the end of the line is going to be 6.75. So I'll go in here and make that. So I just did the left click to lock it in here. So that's going to be 6.75. Now I'm still not fully defined here because this, now notice that the tangents here. So look what happens when I drag this. It's actually going to change that circle, which is kind of cool. So now I need to find out what angle this is going to be. Well, the angle here is given to me from a vertical axis, and we don't have that right now. There's going to be ways of putting that in, but I know that this is 90 degrees. So the total angle is going to be 120 degrees, right? So between this line and this line is the same angle between this line and this one, so it's 120 degrees. So I'll go my Smart Dimension tool and click on this line, and I'll click on that line, and I'll go ahead and make it 120 degrees. And I come down here on the bottom and just check. And what I'm expecting is it to say that it's fully defined, and indeed it is. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start from here. I want this to be perpendicular, and then I'm going to go off at a 45-degree angle and then come down again. So I'm just going to do those quick 2 lines here. So I'm going to make my line. Now I'm expecting that when I click here and start drawing my line, I should be able to see the parallel and the perpendicular. So that's the perpendicular that I want. Now notice where that white vertical constraint is giving me, is telling me that if I click here, I'm going to be directly above the center point of that line. I don't want that, but it's not going to put it on anyway. So I'll click here, and then I'm just going to drop out and just kind of approximately try to do 45 degrees. But again, I'm not going to worry about it. And I'll double click to end that line. So I'm going to again put my Smart Dimension in. This is going to be 1.75. So again, I got to make sure, let me zoom in here, make sure that I'm fully aligned and make that 1.75. The system's a little slow because I'm running this on my computer and I'm running Camtasia, the video capture software, at the same time. So you might see a little bit of a delay. So now the distance between this line and this point, again being aligned, so I'll left click there, that should be the 2.63 dimension. So I'll make that 2.63. And then the angle that I want is going to be 45 degrees. So I can actually grab this line and put the angle out here. If I do it, I can get an interior angle or I'll get an exterior angle. So I click here and here, right? So this is 127, or I can put the angle out here. And this is the angle that I want, and I'll make that 45 degrees. All right, so we've got most of the outside. So now I'm going to come down and I'm going to go, I'm going to pull away, pull back in to put an arc, and I'll come out here and just draw the straight line, and I'll actually end it. I'll put in an angle and then I'll drop it back down here. So I'll put in the next, count them. This is going to be one line plus an arc, another line, another line, and another line. So 1, 2, 3, 4 lines and the arc. So I'm going to come in here and click the point there. And now you'll notice here that I'm going to go everywhere. So I'll have to figure out how to make this line parallel to this line in a little bit. And oh, look at that. Did you see what happened? When I came over here and actually had the drawing or my drawing tool say, hey, look, there's a line over here too. Maybe I want to be parallel to that. And indeed I do. So I'm just going to grab that. And let me do that again just so you can see that. So I'll escape out of the tool. And I'm drawing, and right away it's showing me lines that are perpendicular and parallel to this line. That's not necessarily what I want, but if I come over here and highlight this line, it's now my actual sketch tool knows that that's a line I'm interested in. So when I come back, it says, I can be parallel to that line. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll draw the line there. Now I'm going to pull away, come back here. So I'm back at the original point, and as I pull away now, again I get the arc tool. So I'm going to click there and hopefully get my tangency line. That's what I'm looking for. So now I'm going to come over on an angle, and now in this case I'm going to utilize that fact that that vertical constraint, even though it's not putting it on, is telling me I'm right above the origin. So I'll click here, And when I go down, it's actually going to put the vertical constraint on, which is what I want. All right, so now let me go ahead and put my dimensions on. I'll go up to Smart Dimension, and from this line to that line, it's going to be 2.63. And notice that this line is also horizontal, so I didn't have to worry about a parallel constraint. So I'm going to click here and here, and I'm going to put in the dimension of 2.63. And the angle here is going to be 45 degrees. So I'll click here, and again make that angle 45 degrees. And the distance from the point to the bottom is going to be 1.75. So let me zoom in just to show you what I'm doing. There's the point, and there's the horizontal line, and I need to change this to 1.75. Okay, now the radius of this curve is given here as radius 1.75. So I'll come out here, and right now it's a radius of 2.24, so I'll change that to 1.75. And when all is said and done, I go down here and check out my sketch, and my sketch ends up being fully defined. So I can double check all my dimensions here, but this is what I'm looking at. All right, so I just want to point out that these are tangency constraints. So this one's telling you that there's a tangent between arc 2, which is this, and we can assume that this is line 10. And this tangency constraint is again between line 2, and we would assume that this is designated as line 8. Same thing here. This tangency is between arc 1 and line 1, and this is going to be between arc 1 and line 3. This constraint pair here, notice that this is a pair because it's telling me that this line, so that's parallel line 3, and this is parallel line 8. So these constraints are telling you that this line here, which is calling line 3, is parallel to line 8 over here. This constraint here is a perpendicular constraint, telling you that line 3 and line 5 are perpendicular to each other. And I believe those are all the new constraint icons that we've seen.